Dr. Jodie Richardson, and you're listening to, well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. This episode from our summer series is close to my heart, not only because it's packed with wisdom and the wisdom of one of Australia's most renowned developmental paediatricians. Honestly, if you have not heard Dr. Billy Garvey speak, you've not heard his podcast or learned from his wisdom and experience, you are in for such a treat. When I first learned of Dr. Billy's work and took a look to learn more about him and the kind of work that he does, I realised we had quite a few things in common, not the least of which is that we both have border collies in our families, and they're both that beautiful sandy blonde colour. So, as I just said, Billy is a developmental paediatrician, and he is working tirelessly, and when I say tirelessly, I mean it, to share the insights that he uses every day in his clinical work so that more families, teachers and clinicians can benefit. So he finds himself saying similar things often to families in clinic, and he is finding ways to be able to bring those insights to the public, because a waiting list to see somebody like Dr. Billy in a clinical setting can be up to 2 years. In fact, I think that's how long his waiting list is. So he's on an absolute mission to bring the things he says and shares with families to be more accessible for all of us. And that's why he was so happy to join me here in the studio to record this podcast. In our conversation, Dr. Billy explains anxiety in a way that makes sense to kids and to teens. So any parents or teachers listening can take that, or any teenagers listening can take that on board as well. And it's more about focusing on their bodies and what's happening in their nervous systems and the experiences that they're feeling in their body, like a racing heart rate or a knot in their stomach or that muscle tension, those types of physical symptoms, which you've heard me talk about on the podcast quite regularly. So bright and sensitive kids can often hear explanations that are actually too complex for their age. And so Dr. Billy, what he does is he actually helps us simplify things so that we don't miss the opportunity to connect and to guide our young people through these overwhelming moments in ways that really and genuinely support them. Billy actually describes how anxiety symptoms stem from an involuntary trigger in the nervous system, and that it's not a choice. And also that their bodies are reacting as if they're in danger to prepare to fight or flee. Now, this is such important understanding if you are a parent of an anxious young person. Often the opportunity can be missed if we don't understand anxiety, and a parent might say to a child, settle down, or it's okay, or there's nothing to worry about. We can miss this opportunity of really showing genuine understanding and providing support and strategies that mean that the child will come back to us knowing that we're genuinely going to be able to help them. And so many takeaways from this conversation. Practical tools, lots of compassion, of course. You can just tell how deeply Dr. Billy cares about the work that he does, and that there's so much hope for anyone with anxiety, which is what I love so much about this podcast, that it brings insights, practical skills and tools, understanding, more confidence, hopefully to put things into practice, and more hope. That's what I just love. So huge thanks to Dr. Billy. This is one of those episodes that stays with you, whether this is your first time listening or you're coming back for a second listen. Billy, thank you again.
Thanks, Jodie.
I want to start by, I guess, asking you about your journey to where you are now, because what Billy and I both know, listeners, is that we both grew up in Frankston, which is a suburb about an hour south of Melbourne in Victoria, here in Australia. But we had, a different kind of academic journey, because I didn't get kicked out of high school and Billy did.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and kind of how you ultimately ended up in the role that you do so brilliantly as a developmental paediatrician.
Yeah, the reason I like telling that story and I feel comfortable telling it, I think, is because it hopefully gives parents some idea that, never too late. And that's not because, wow, I've become a doctor, but I just love what I do. I live a very, successful, happy life because I get the privilege of all the work and the kids that I get to meet in clinic and some of the other stuff that I do. But I'm a good practical evidence of that. it's not really how smart you are that dictates your adult mental health, your adult physical health, or your academic trajectory or your income. It's your social and emotional development. And I'm just lucky that while my mum was, raising 3 boys on her own and working a lot, she just was really quite amazing given how limited her capacity was at making sure she gave us good social and emotional support in our development. So I kind of really enjoyed the work that I was doing for about 6 years in childcare. Around there, I realised I didn't have what it takes to become a teacher because they're just amazing and the most important professionals out there. And then I went to uni. When I got kicked out of school, I was lucky that I went to a school that was really amazing. They supported me, and I just scraped through to uni and then kind of just scraped through into med school. And then that's kind of my typical thing. And then I got back meeting the kids that I'd spent all this time in childcare with in clinic. And, I think a lot of us, I wonder, Jody, your work in this space, mine comes from like some of the challenges I had as a kid and wishing I'd had better support and people knew better about how to guide kids that are having a tough time. My mum really struggled with, mental illness and things. And so I also think of her when I'm getting to meet families in clinic and how I can support them. And then I've got these 2 beautiful little kids myself, and I am very lucky that I get to really think about this all the time, how I can best guide them. And I'm a so-called expert that then goes home and lives in the real world with 2 little kids and, has to think about how does the evidence actually work when you've got a kid who's struggling or you're struggling yourself.
No, I was reading in your book about when you first had little Yvette in your arms when she came home from the hospital, and how you're like, I've got this sorted, because you were running the Unsettled Babies Clinic at the time, weren't you? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we do that clinic every Thursday afternoon, and it's amazing because it's such a, 20 to 30% of new parents will experience postnatal depression and antenatal depression, and so it's this privilege of meeting them. And myself and another developmental pediatrician who's amazing run that clinic, but we built a lot of the evidence around, unsettled babies and published papers and national clinical guidelines and things like that. But it was a good test because then I came home and I'd literally held hundreds, if not, thousands of babies in my career. And I was like, I'm going to be so good at this. And then I wasn't, I really struggled those first few nights. And I actually struggled to connect with both of my kids for the first months, to be honest. And I think it's a really important message to put out there that, social media can tell us sometimes that from the moment kids are born, we're connected with them and we feel amazing and it's the best thing ever. And I had to spend a lot of time and effort and energy into building those bonds, and now they're beautiful with both of them. But it's funny, that bit in the book, there's about 5 or 6 bits in the book where for the audio book, I choke up a bit. Even when I read that story about like Annalise coming out and wrapping up Evie in her dressing gown, it's even on the audiobook you can tell that I'm struggling to read it, even though it was years ago, and I obviously have had to read it a few times in writing the book.
Yes, yeah, it is. And like you say, there's the knowledge that you learn when you're doing your training, and then there's the putting it into practice in the clinic, and then there are your own experiences from your own family, and that's what I really love and admire about your work. You're really open about your own journey. And I think you just make it all okay for us to just do the best we can with what we've got, learn more and do better.
Yeah.
And that we don't, we won't always get it right all the time, but there's so much that we can take on board from your podcast and your book now, and the work that you're doing with schools and corporates and families as well. So yeah, I just really thank you, and thanks for sharing some of it with us here today.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Your work is amazing in this space too.
Oh, thank you. And like you were saying, it comes from my own experiences of my mum having anxiety, and I learn about myself all the time. Even doing interviews with people, I'm often thinking, oh, that really applies. And that my journey with my own mental health was such that even when it became evident through what I was thinking that I needed some psychological support, that it just wasn't understood. Even the GP diagnosed me with asthma. The breathing wasn't recognised as being anxiety. The thinking, I remember distinctly going once to see a psychologist who thought that because of what I was thinking, that life at home must be really terrible and abusive and this and that, just because, it just wasn't understood. And it's really awful to think that I was a little primary school kid trying to get some help, really misunderstood, trying to convince this psychologist that actually home life was peaceful and loving and supportive. I couldn't control what I was thinking. I thought I should be able to, and we never went back because it was so upsetting. So things have come a long way.
Totally, yeah. It's we're getting so much better at understanding what's actually going on for these kids and us in these moments, and but there's so many people have that experience in their past, and I think often those of us that go into these roles, be it professionals in any space that look after kids, are often thinking about their own childhood and trying to do it better. That's it.
We talk a lot about anxiety from so many different angles here on the podcast, and also other areas that are really related to mental health. And I guess I'd really love for you to start by sharing with our listeners today, how do you talk to young people about anxiety? Because I know that, we know that obviously it's a huge issue. So many kids and teens and families are struggling. And so, one of the things I read in your book that I really loved and really resonated with me was when you said there's no magic behind your door at clinic. And I know that the work you're doing, you're looking to bring it out so that it's more publicly available, because there is such a huge wait for, an appointment to see someone like yourself or your colleagues. And whilst it feels like I've just got to get in to see that person and things will be okay. And so perhaps, today I think listeners take on board what Dr. Billy shares with us from the point of view that you've got access to somebody who is a professional working with families and young children and adolescents and teens every sort of 4 days a week. Is that correct? 4 days a week?
That I'm in clinic?
That you're in clinic?
Yeah, I do clinic 4 days a week, and then some research and all the other advocacy work. So the math's not good when you actually start putting it all together.
No, but it's like, how many hours are in your day?
Yeah, but I agree. Most of the kids that I meet in clinic, it's an over 2 year wait. We know that, this data as well, but 1 in 7 kids in this country aged 4 to 17 years of age in a 12-month period meets criteria for a mental illness, not is a bit anxious or a bit sad. And we know that the most likely professional LC is a GP, and it's 35% of them. And they're the most important medical professionals we have. But most, the big majority of kids that are not getting to see anyone ever, our clinic has a 2 year wait, and we know that 50% of adult mental health starts in childhood. So we've got to do better than just giving an appointment and saying, we'll see you in 2.5 years' time. And so that's, what I'm trying to share. And the question of how do I talk about anxiety in clinic is a really important one, because the book and the podcast exist because so many times, even in the same day, I'll say the same thing multiple times to different families, and I'm like, this is crazy, you've waited this long. And that's the more important bit that I do, I think, than the diagnosis or medication and things like that, is how do we learn together? And I often, that's age appropriate, because we often make the mistake of talking too much to kids at a high level, especially bright, sensitive kids. We set them up to fail because we're like, you can understand this, how come you then still struggling with anxiety? And it's like, well, because those are two completely different things, being able to have a conversation about something and then being able to handle that emotion, as you know well, Jodie. But I often talk about just what's happening in their bodies, because it's a really important part of it, that we as parents and professionals that support kids, that we understand this is an involuntary trigger that's occurring through their nervous system. That means they are experiencing fear and worry that's overwhelming their system, and it's not a choice. And that's why we shouldn't say it's okay, settle down, don't make such a big deal of it, because you're challenging everything that's true to them in the moment, that their body's telling them that I need to run, I need to fight. My sympathetic nervous system is just firing everything, looking for horizons, looking to lash out. And so we miss an opportunity to connect and then guide them through that if we dismiss it or just tell them to settle down.
Yes. Yeah, we absolutely do. And it's like you say, it's a response that occurs, and sometimes the trigger for the response is completely outside of our conscious awareness, and a child can feel their heart racing and their breathing change, and can be trembling and can be sweating and perspiring and having so many frightening thoughts, and you feel really invalidated and also more alone, don't you, if an adult says you're okay, you don't need to feel this way. What can adults do instead when they notice it and have a really nice opportunity to be able to help the child begin to understand what is happening, and help them to kind of notice that and develop a curious kind of mindset around it rather than very fearful reaction that comes when we don't understand what's happening in our body when we're feeling that way.
Yeah, you used a beautiful word there, curious, and we should be curious. And the important bit about curiosity is that we're not judgmental. So one of the biggest mistakes we make is that we unintentionally sometimes are judging kids about, why is this such a big deal? I can't believe you're so overwhelmed by this. And so we need to be genuinely curious about, I wonder what's happening. The trick is you can't often ask the kid. So you can't say, Jody, why are you struggling so much in this moment? Because you might not know.
Yeah.
And we as adults, like you've already said, we sometimes don't know why we're so anxious and why we're so worried. And we certainly can't get to that if we're not first being able to regulate our emotions. And so the first step actually for anyone that's supporting a kid who's struggling is to make sure you're calm yourself, and that's self-regulation. And I spend a lot of time with parents that really struggle in those moments, first building their capacity to calm themselves and self-regulate, because you can't co-regulate or connect or do anything with kids if you're not first calm yourself and can access the best of your thinking and the best of your approach. Also, you know, we know so much of the evidence is around how much we just connect, not even through talking to each other. Like you and I have this, you know, beautiful history of like where we grew up and all this stuff, but you've got such natural warmth that it's very easy to connect with you. And it's not because of what you're saying, it's because of how you are.
Yes.
And if we can learn to be like that with kids about how we are, how we hold ourselves when we do speak, what's the tone, what's the pace, it's slow and soft, we're coming from curiosity, we're not being judgmental, it gives them the best chance to look around and feel safe and supported, and then we can guide them through it. But you can't get anywhere near guiding until you're connected with a kid.
You know, at the moment I'm teaching our 16-year-old how to drive. And Peter, my husband, does so much more driving than me. He drives here. I mean, he's literally just been to 2 days ago or 3 days ago. He went to Geelong, then to Yarrawonga, then to Shepparton. Anyway, he was away for a couple of days, and yet we've just agreed that it's me that will. I guess we have more time. And at first, I thought, oh goodness, I don't want my anxiety about this to influence his ability to remain calm and to be able to concentrate and to be, you know, in a state of his nervous system where he can be the most focused driver that he can be. And so I've been focusing on myself. So not saying anything to him, but just, I mean, admittedly, I was holding onto the what do you call those things? The handle.
I know what you mean. Someone's got a funny term for them about being like the saving handle. And like,
the saving. I was holding on tight to that, and he goes, "Oh, you're holding on for dear life, are you, Mum?" And then I realised, oh, that as a posture, as a movement, you know, we were on the freeway, and it was our first time on the freeway, and I hadn't sort of even realised I'd done it. And so when we hop in the car, I think about my breathing. I think about coming back into my body in terms of a mindful moment, and I think about my posture and my tone, and so it's not even just with kids who have an anxiety challenge or are finding their anxieties really getting in the way of their functioning, is it? These are strategies we as parents can apply in lots of circumstances.
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, it's a good move if you're supporting a kid and you think, could I do this? And if you couldn't, it's probably not fair to ask them to. Yeah. So yeah, and it's great. And yeah, mindfulness, you know, it's really important that we understand the true depth of mindfulness and what it actually means, as opposed to the superficial, it's just breathing exercises and then everything's fine. Mindfulness at its core is about looking inwards at your own experience, but also, once again, doing it non-judgmentally and thinking, I wonder why I'm gripping this handle, because it's the first time going out here and I'm really nervous because I'm worried something bad is going to happen. And you've got to have that healthy balance of like, the anxiety helps me to be more alert and to make sure I'm focusing on him. I'm catching early signs there might be something that's going to go wrong, but I'm doing it in a way that's helpful and healthy and can make us perform well. When it stuffs up your performance or your functioning, that's when it becomes clinical anxiety. That, for example, I just can't be in a car because I'm so worried about something bad happening. I've got this phobia. I've got this excessive fear and worry, and it cripples me.
Yes.
And that's where, you have to go right back to what we talked about. How do we talk to kids about anxiety? And then you're doing this beautiful demonstration of mindfulness or interoception, like what is happening in my body, what's the experience that I'm having. And that's, that goes back to like Buddhism and all that stuff. But so much of the evidence-based therapeutic approaches is really built in the science of that. Like, what does that actually look like? How do we focus? And it's different for everyone. Like, it's different for... I've got a gorgeous 3-year-old girl with a red mop of red hair just like me. She's like a little version of me. She's really similar to me. She's like a sensitive temperament. She kind of has fiery emotions. But I need to be careful that I don't give her what I think I need now or what I needed when I was a kid. I've got to watch her. And the most important trick with all of this stuff is being responsive and consistent. Like, how do I actually watch what she's doing and how she's responding to what I'm trying to do to help and adjust where I need to? Knowing that for her, I have to be down at a level. I've got to be calm. She's got to come to me. Like, I've got to make sure I don't talk to her too much. It overwhelms her and frustrates her. See, many families in clinic that say that. Every time I try and talk to him, he just gets angry at me and yells and says, go away, or emotionally gets worse, or she starts screaming. And you go, cool, that's not what works then. Like, I'm going to keep trying to find what works, and often just sitting in space with them, being calm and being here and saying, I'm here, I'm here. And that's a good mantra for them to hear, but it's a good mantra for us to give ourselves, because that's actually our role. Like, co-regulation is not about fixing things. It's not about fixing emotions. It's not about changing behaviours. It's about helping everyone involved return to calm.
Yes.
And that's tricky, but it's where all of the value is in kids who are struggling.
Yes, it is, because it's so contagious and it's so frightening and it's so worrying when your child is struggling with their mental health and you are struggling to get an appointment, or you don't connect with a GP that you have, and you as a parent are feeling very stressed and anxious. That self-regulation that you were saying before is just obviously the first step. Can you tell listeners a little bit more about self-regulation and maybe share something that you know has been really effective with sort of families that you've worked with?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that kind of, first step about before I go in, and remembering you have to work on this. Like, it's none of us are good at it naturally. If I'm being 100% honest, it took me until my 30s to learn how to do this.
Yes.
Which is a good reminder of, like, I can't expect a little kid to figure it out quickly.
Yes.
But I'm hoping that my effort purposefully with the evidence practically is going to mean that it's not, this is something my kids are getting good at now. But yeah, it's really about, like, what's my experience in this. Now, what we talk about in clinic is a plan A, plan B. What I mean by that is plan A is calm myself first, go in, connect, help them calm, validate their experience, not be judgmental, help them put a language and understanding around the experience they're having, and then help them find the pathway through that works for them. That's plan A. Plan B is like, we just need to get through this experience. I need to get you in the car. We need to have this happen. We need to get to the other side of this because of stress, pressure, or I don't have the capacity to deal with it now.
Yes.
There's no harm in that, because we are role modelling the imperfection of our difficulties with emotional regulation, and kids need to see that, and then the recovery. But we get better at stuff through plan A.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? That's where we build. What we're really talking about is cognitive abilities. How do kids learn how to self-regulate, holding access to their higher functioning that's not lost. So it's, that's the thing. And I spend a lot of time in clinic. The helpful stuff in clinic is that often we're pitching things too high at kids. So that's probably the most common experience in clinic is drop the expectation and drop the demand.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so like a classic example is like often girls that are bright, we expect, they're struggling, so we're going to talk to them after that struggle's happened, or at the end of the day on the edge of the bed, we're going to have a conversation with them and say, yeah, hey, I heard about this thing that happened at school today. Yeah. You got completely overwhelmed, or you lashed out, or whatever. Having a conversation, and often the bright kids are like, yeah, I wish I didn't do it. I can see that stuffed up the class. I can see that it hurt the other kid. I understand that you're working really hard and you're really frustrated and this must be really hard for you. The next time they're in that space, they're not able to deal with it because we haven't actually taught them emotional regulation. We've taught them emotional reflection about like just reflecting on things, which is a completely different skill. It helps with connection and bonding and attachment. It doesn't help with dealing with the next time you're in the classroom or at home and things are starting to escalate. So how do we catch those early signs and then guide them through that, as opposed to afterwards say that? The other thing is, once kids are completely dysregulated, we shouldn't try and get them to do anything. We should just keep them safe and make them feel safe. That's another really important bit of like the practical strategies. If you look at a child and say, I think they're really dysregulated, you just go, cool, my role is to keep them safe, make them feel safe, like including, you know, from harming themselves or whatever that might mean, running out on the street for younger kids, like physically harming themselves for older kids. It's just about safety. And the mental health first aid stuff that we've got that's coming out a bit later this year is this national content that we've designed that steps through how you do that. Like safety. Safety is the priority for those kids that are really struggling.
Yes, it's, you know, classic example that I've used, and a lot of my work used to be in sport, in that you can't, you know, in the middle of a high pressure game in a like elite sport, you're not practicing a skill for the first time. You're not trying to draw on something that's new and unpracticed and that isn't sort of embedded. And so it's between it. It's like striking while the iron's cold, as Chris McCurry says, which is a really nice way to sort of put that we have to learn strategies. The kids have to identify, don't they, when they're feeling dysregulated and when the changes are coming, and then have something they've practiced to start to put into practice. Yeah,
and it's actually a really beautiful analogy, because the game day or the field, which is not practice and training, for lots of kids is the playground or the classroom or the birthday party. And we need to teach them in the safest, most consistent relationship and environment, which is often at home with a primary caregiver, how to handle this. And then we do what's called graduated exposure. We bring them in gently into that environment, maybe with one other child on a playground with someone they feel familiar with, having a play date with a couple of kids, knowing that the end goal is they succeed at the birthday party, they succeed on their own on the playground or in the classroom when you can't be there to support them. But for a lot of kids, that's 20 steps. That takes months. But it's worth investing in it, because that's how you get them to that point of success.
It is, isn't it? And it is a slow, patient road.
Yeah.
And I love what you said before about the plan A and plan B, because sometimes we just as parents, we don't have the capacity in ourselves, like you said, to be able to do, you know, to be able to execute plan A well. And I know personally in my family, my children are older than yours, and I've been open about my mental health, and there are times when I do know that growing up with a mum who was always anxious and had a pretty short fuse, and I didn't understand. I just sort of knew when to, you know, keep out the way. I've said to my kids on occasion, I'm feeling highly anxious at the moment, so I'm going to go for a run or go and do something. I'll also let them know that I might not respond or react in the ways that you might normally hope I would or expect me to. This is how I'm feeling at the moment, and just so you know. And we can have those conversations because they're older, but it's been built over time. So if I can say, hands up, and Billy's in the studio with me, you wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing, but sometimes I say, look, this is a bit much for me at the moment. It's not you, it's what I'm going through. I'll come back to this. And I feel sometimes ashamed of myself, sometimes when I haven't been able to operate the way I would normally operate 95% of the time. But they really appreciate it. They're fine. They're like, cool, okay. Do you want a hug, is what my daughter usually says.
Yep.
And then I'll come back. And it's not often, but it's often enough that, you know, they I guess the role modelling is there, that if they feel that way, they can take their time out and do what they need, and sometimes they do that too. So
yeah, it's beautiful, Jodie, because I think there's three important bits, and you've just highlighted one of the really important ones of those three. There's three important bits to supporting emotional development in kids. It's how we respond to their emotional difficulties, and we've just spoken a fair bit about that. You know, it's how we talk about emotions when everyone's calm, because that's how we can actually learn about it, not in the difficult moments. And then how we role model our own emotional difficulties. And I'm pretty similar to you. Like, I have times where I just need to go and exercise and exert myself, and that's really protective for me. I have to do it every day, sometimes multiple times, because I'm really vulnerable to, being overwhelmed by emotional difficulties, and I sacrifice time with my kids for that. And I feel like you talked about it, shame is a really damaging, destructive thing to ourselves and to our kids, and we should try and avoid it at all costs, because it really challenges who we are. And if we feel shameful about, not being perfect in how we regulate our own emotions, then we are unintentionally role modeling that for our kids. And we don't want them to grow up like thinking, which is a beautiful thing that you've broken, the cycle of like everyone just needs to stay away from me, or avoid difficult emotions and push them down, or they're destructive. And I grew up in a similar thing, just with a lot of, household dysfunction, and kind of it took me a while to unlearn that's kind of normal, chaos and shouting and all of those things, to realise. And I'm very lucky that I've got a lot more capacity, being a parent myself now than my mum did.
Yeah, and growing up with a single mum who worked really hard. And we talked off air, didn't we, just about, parenting's hard when there's two of you, let alone when there's one. And we know a lot more now, and I know again, and I'm sure your mum feels the same. My mum and my brother and I have often spoken about, mum's, I guess, regrets about what family life was like. And of course, we're so understanding and empathetic towards her. And I'll say, Mum, are you proud of us? Are you proud of us? You've done a great job, because we've turned out okay, kind of thing. As have you. It is hard as parents. It's incredibly hard. And I know you must see a lot of parents who sort of feel like I'm just not doing enough. I can't do this.
So a lot of it is just take pressure off, reduce the expectations you're putting upon yourself of like vegetables and homework and all that stuff. And the thing that, will sustain all of us is the relationship. You know what I mean? Like my mum passed away in her early 50s, but I wish I could go back and just have more quality time with her. And I think that's one of the hard things, is that like a lot of the families I meet in clinic, I work a lot, my partner works a lot, we don't have any family around. And so we don't get much time with our kids, but we're trying really hard to have really good quality time and just celebrate them and share joy. The beautiful thing is, we know that really strong, secure attachment and bonding, actually all the evidence shows that if you can do that with kids, it'll build their emotional regulation capacity, because they feel safe and secure in who they are. They know they look around and there's help. Like circle of security teaches us that. It shows that this safe harbour is important. People really understand the bit of like, always feel comfortable coming back to me, non-judgmentally, I'll always be supportive and all that stuff. But it's also about when they leave us, physically, socially, mentally, celebrating them and having joy in that, like that proximity distancing, about when they go off and explore the playground, teenagers exploring relationships where you're not there, they're practicing being adults. You're celebrating them, but unconditionally supporting them when that doesn't go the way they wanted it to.
That idea of a safe harbour, and just this idea that, and as we both know, a lot of students aren't at school. There's a lot of school refusal, a lot of anxiety around that, and it can create a lot of kind of locking of horns in homes and things. And so I think it's such a powerful reminder and lesson to maintain the connection and maintain the strength of that relationship and be supportive. It's kind of the foundation on which everything else will eventually build.
Yeah, and the thing I've learned from families in a lot of these spaces is that the best thing you can do is stand next to kids with this stuff. Whether it's like really struggling to attend school, like we're still seeing kids that haven't returned to school since the pandemic, pretty frequently through our clinic. And I think the hardest thing is, it's a really good example of like, how do you practically apply the evidence? I think that families get stuck in what seems like a one of two options. You got to go, bad luck, you got to be at school, or I can't do this to you, you need to stay at home.
Yes.
But it's a really good point of finding the middle ground of how do I validate your experience, understand, do all the psychoeducation, build your capacity, and then really support you in the way that you think about these worries, and then go back in gently with support. And it's going back in gently and succeeding is the actual important bit of that, not how much time they're at school, whether they're participating in the curriculum or whatever. And all of my PhD is based on this. The quality of the relationship with the teachers, is the thing that really, really matters. And that's why I think they're the most important professional, because they will bring up our generation, especially the most vulnerable kids, will decide how they feel about themselves based on the relationships that they share with those teachers for years and years.
Yeah, they will, and we can all reflect on those teachers for ourselves, can't we?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's hard to not focus on the ones that weren't great, but there was always ones that were amazing.
Yeah, what's been interesting about me and the age that we had our son at, I was 34, that he entered prep with one of my students' daughters, and so my student and I stood on the same deck outside the prep classroom, and we're like, oh my gosh. And because we had great relationships, there was a big hug, and it was lovely. But it's being, I guess, having taught in the community where I live, bound to see lots of previous students. One of the things that I'd love for you to share, you summarise in the book 5 main components of CBT for anxiety. I wonder if you could just sort of give us a bit of a headline for each of those, so parents listening and even teachers who have such an important role with so many children when it comes to their mental health and their learning as well, can sort of get like a bigger picture view of kind of like how you can step through. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, this goes back to your point of like there's no magic that happens and we should share this, and a lot of my work is advocating for this being done. Like Guiding Growing Minds is all about that. So, and CBT is like, as you know really well, Jodie, it's like the most evidence-based, but there's other evidence-based approaches. I actually really love emotionally focused therapy, like Susan Johnson's work and all that stuff, but it's similar in a way. There's consistency across them, and those 5 steps that you talk about. The first is actually what we've been doing, and you've been helping listeners on the podcast, is psychoeducation. Like, how do we understand this stuff? What's going on in these little kids' bodies? It's not a choice. This reaction is involuntary. They're firing off. And that's the first step, is trying to build everyone's understanding, the child at an age-appropriate level, the parents, the educators, everyone, because it's really important that we all have this shared understanding, because then we'll be consistent in our support. Because if a kid is struggling and one person is sensitive and responsive and consistent and the other person is reactive, then the kid has to have the additional thing of looking around and going, I'm in this classroom or I'm with this parent, so I'm not safe, or I can't predict what's going to happen, or whatever, and that's challenging. The second step is really about symptom control. We've talked about mindfulness. There's lots of different things that we can do in that space that is really about what works for that individual kid. And every single child and teenager and adult really is different in what works for them. And that's why I struggle with some of the universal, like, this is the one way.
Yes.
And that's the challenge of some of the shallower mindfulness stuff, is like kids or parents will try it and then go, this doesn't work, there must be something wrong with me, or I'm not doing it right, but actually it's just probably not right for that kid. So once you've got that you can help them learn and practice it, as we've said, in the safest, most consistent relationship and environment, then extending it out. Then we talk about, like CBT talks about cognitive restructuring, other therapeutic approaches are really thinking about how do we gently bring more positive ways to process those thoughts and experiences. So sometimes it's focusing on the negative, but the better evidence is around what else might happen. What if you go to school and it's a positive experience? What would that look like? And, helping them process that. You can't go anywhere near it until you've done the symptom control. So a dysregulated kid, you can't start speaking about what else might happen. But that what else might happen is a really important bit. The fourth step is exposure, and we've talked about that. It has to be graduated, so small increments, watching carefully, making sure the success continues and they don't dysregulate, but always stepping forward just as small a step is required. The fifth step is a really important one, because we know a lot of kids and teenagers and adults will relapse if they have experienced clinical anxiety or depression, and it's relapse prevention. And relapse prevention is about how to, even though the dust has settled and everything's okay now, how do we keep doing this work? And that's why, I see a therapist because of that. I make sure I regularly exercise. I prioritize my relationships. Nick, who shares the podcast with me, is a beautiful protective factor of my mental health, and so is my amazing, gorgeous partner. So is time with my kids. All of those things that sustain me and protect me. The interesting thing is there's really solid evidence about positive childhood experiences, and they're like 2 non-parental adults who take a genuine interest in me, participating in community traditions, feeling like I'm a part of the school community, having one person at home that makes me feel safe, having people I can talk to about my feelings, and having friends that are positive and make me feel good about myself. Those are the keys. Like, those are the things that are protective and are preventative if you haven't had to deal with this, but also that's relapse prevention. That's how we think about, how do I make sure we keep investing in that stuff and don't, go, well, this isn't a priority anymore because this kid's attending school well, or not anxious about everything they were previously.
And we do know that having had a previous challenge with your mental illness will predispose you for future challenges. And so, of course, it's got to be something that, it's nice and it's such a relief for a family when the really difficult kind of part of the journey seems to be behind them.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, you can't sort of just decide, well, that's it, that box is ticked and move on. And I mean, we all need it to live a rich and meaningful life, knowing that there's all sorts of ups and downs. Nobody is immune to life's ups and downs. And so it might not be a decline in mental health or, another big challenge with anxiety, but it could be the loss of a pet, or it could be a friend moving interstate, or for these kids, they're going to have challenges, and these skills are all, and those protective factors are universal across all of those challenges, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And you also make a really good point about, like, we meet a lot of families that feel really bad that they've got a history or active mental illness as a parent, and that they're dooming their kids, and that's not true. Like, I have that myself, and it actually makes me sensitive and better equipped to support my kids. Like, I think I have an easier time than Annalise because of that, because she's, just one of those people that is just amazing. She's a surgeon. She's, phenomenal in every way. But she struggles sometimes when our kids are struggling, that she's like, why is this such a big deal? Yeah. And it's easier for me to go, I think I can relate to overreacting about something little happening in the world. So, it just prepares me a little bit better and creates that greater sensitivity. So I do not think that your kids are doomed if you struggle with mental illness, and I think some of the best parents I've ever met in my whole career have been those that are fighting those battles. And it's been a privilege to be a part of that journey with them and learn from them.
Yes, I do. I love listening to you and Nick, and just the stories that you share, and the fact that, it feels like it's magic behind the door. It feels like it's the panacea. And even in my role, I'll have parents sometimes write to me and say, I'm desperate. If they know I'm on the Mornington Peninsula, and they'll say, who do you recommend and who can I see? And of course, it's a huge part of it, but you being able to kind of like open the door and let people see that it's very important. There's so much families can do, and take this knowledge, these skills, these ideas, these examples, and apply it in our own families. So hopefully many won't ever need to get to see someone like you, and those that do, doing everything that's within their power in the meantime and supporting their kids along the way.
Yeah, and I'm very fortunate that I'm in a situation where I don't have a private clinic. Like, you can't come and see me, and I always feel like I've failed a bit when people are like, can you meet my child? Because I'm like, this is the best of what I do in clinic. I'm just sharing it more broadly, and you can't come and see me. It's a long wait to get into the clinic I work in, and you're more likely to meet one of our amazing fellows, and they're phenomenal. Like, that's another privilege I have, is training those guys coming up. But I think this is what you're doing. Like, what we're trying to do is share the evidence. Like, the Guiding Growing Minds has a podcast and now a book. Like, the podcast has no ads, because I'm like, the community is so strong within the pop culture parenting that it's a privilege for me and Nick to be a part of it. We see ourselves as equal in partners with the entire community around it. And it's, I think it's just a small answer to how many families that feel like they're completely lost and alone. We've had such a disconnection of community, and I feel that personally myself. Like, we have an amazing person that we pay to help us with our kids. She's phenomenal, and we couldn't function without her. But a lot of people, are feeling like there's no family they can tap on the shoulder. They don't have any way to get support. And what I'm trying to do is, like, build a community that can understand there is so much that we can do to support our kids and ourselves in this space when we understand what all of the science has shown us over 60, 70 years of research. It's a really good point. So I'm a bit similar to you, that I'm like, this is, learn about this and learn about the different steps and watch your child and figure out what works. And, that reflective practice piece is the most important step any parents can do. Not this is the one way to parent.
Yes.
But think, how are we going? What's important to us? Are we all succeeding and feeling good about ourselves in that? If we're not, let's shift up some stuff. Let's change our approach, and let's do it for, a number of weeks, at most a couple of months, and we should see benefit. I meet families every day that will tell me a strategy they've been trying for months and months and months, and then can't tell me if it's helping or not. And I'm like, God, that's awful. You've been investing so much energy into this approach and you're not sure if it's working. So really, really hard stuff, because every single family I've ever met, every single parent I've ever met, including all the families that come to me through child protection, love their kids just as much as you love yours and as much as I love mine. They're just holding more weight and struggling more with things and have less capacity. So to be able to build their capacity through the stuff you do and the stuff that I get to do outside of clinic is wonderful. It's really, really cool.
It really is. It really is. And it's, we're so lucky with these mediums to be able to have conversations like this. And one of the things that I've learned was that as a parent, over the years, and I think just at the start, I'd love you to tell me whether or not this is kind of what most parents do, but I kind of was parenting in the ways that I knew I would respond to. Like I just had this innate kind of approach, and it was really successful with child number 1 because we're very similar, and child number 2. And Peter just said to me once, because I was getting quite frustrated because the approach that I was taking just with sort of, various things just was ineffective. And he said, Jodie, she is not you, she is me. And it was like, oh, the penny dropped, and I just realised, you've got to, it's so obvious, and this was a long time ago, but that's that reflection, isn't it? Just stop and think, well, who are they as young growing people? What do they need? And it's trial and error, isn't it, to kind of work out, like you were saying, about that approach that's right for them, and then have a look and have reflection on what's happening, how are the kids going, what's working, what isn't, what can we try. And I guess over time, as the kids get older, you can start to have those conversations with them, can't you?
Oh yeah, definitely. We make sure that we're really child-centred and focused in clinic. But the kids should always lead us. My kids lead me in what support I'm going to be able to give them, and it's the same in clinic. I'm trying to learn, every single kid I meet, I'm trying to learn, where can you lead us? Where, because every single kid wants to succeed. They want to contribute, they want to be connected, they want to be a part of the classroom, the family, whatever. Some of them get so stuck and so used to not being that they get comfortable with it. But then connecting with them, building their self-esteem, building how they feel about themselves, and then, helping them lead us to what support they need is really important. But you're right. As kids get older and older, they should have more autonomy about what that looks like.
Yes.
What can I do to help? And every single kid and family I meet in clinic, I'm like, I'm paid to help you and make things better. I'm not being kind and generous. This is my actual job, and you will decide whether I've been helpful or not. And you should tell me, and you come in and tell me what's the most important thing that we need to focus on today. What's the priority? Because we know most families that leave clinics will say afterwards, I didn't get to talk about what I wanted to. And I'm sure I do that too. So what we try and do is a really family-based partnership approach. It's a family partnership model that says we should equally share, the responsibility and the guidance, and not have a hierarchy that I'm in charge, I'm the expert, I'm going to decide what this kid needs. Right. But it's hard. I have to push back against that all the time, because I meet kids all the time. I start hearing the story and I go, sweet, I know what this kid needs. This kid needs this and this and this. But I have to resist that and say, no, actually, I don't know this kid. And I need to learn from this kid. And that's a good example of the difference between, here's the 3 steps that every kid needs to, build their resilience. And actually, every single kid has a different journey through that. It's really important. Yeah.
It's so good that you have that awareness. And it's just, again, it's about being curious, learning and being led. And I think I've learned to do that a lot more as a parent. But I'm sitting here, actually I'm standing, listening to you. I'm thinking, and it's time to reflect. It's that reflective practice that you just spoke about. It's that coming back and thinking, right, where could I apply this this kind of approach in my own home, even if it's not related to mental health. It's just related to so many other aspects of family life. So thank you. For children in families where parents feel that they're quite well equipped, they've listened, they've read, they've learned, they've been following your work and my work and other evidence-based work that they feel really empowered by, but they've got a young person in their family who is not the least bit interested in talking at all about the mental health challenges that they're having. What would you suggest and recommend to those parents?
Yeah, so they feel like they're shut out from the child. Yeah. So we meet these kids a lot in clinic, especially teenagers, especially boys, but lots of girls as well. Yeah, so it's about like the analogy that I use in my head and try and share with families is what I want when the kid does eventually look around, they see someone cheering for them. Yeah. And it's a really important thing that, sometimes you've got to be on the sidelines just cheering for a long time before the kid finally feels safe and confident enough to say, hey, I think I'm having a hard time, or I want to talk to you about something, or, and just that consistency. And also most of the work in building relationships happens like what we've talked about in that joy and just celebrating them. And you've got to protect those sanctuaries and those opportunities from, and what's going on at school, or how come you're not talking to me, and how come you're shutting down? Because if the child feels like that's a risk every time they want to do something with you, they will avoid and withdraw because they're not at that stage yet. And just seeing where are my opportunities for connection, and I just want connection and to strengthen the relationship and all that stuff, and that will pay off in the long run because they will get to the point where they do say that. And I've met kids that are trying to burn schools down. They've been so traumatized and all that stuff, and I'm so lucky that I get to play the long game with them. And that's when it comes back, is when they finally feel like they are valued and they can trust people and they deserve the love that's around them. A lot of parents will feel like, no, I definitely love my kid. I put so much effort into that. Some kids are just really sensitive to feeling like that's not the case. And it's just about keep going on that, keep prioritizing that. And then, make sure. Teenagers are really interesting because one of the practical difficulties is that they phase shift their sleep so much that they will often come to you late in the evening to talk about stuff. And a lot of parents are like, oh man, I'm so exhausted from the day. I just need to zone out in front of the TV for my own mental health. And then the parents, the teenager comes over and goes, I just broke up with my partner, or this awful thing just happened, or whatever. And you're like, oh God, can we talk about this tomorrow? So it's really interesting. Even the biology challenges us in that bit of like just teenagers and what changes for them. So but you learn it through younger years. If you don't have that because of whatever's happened in the younger years, it's not lost. It's never lost. I've never met a kid that I'm like, it's over, it's too late, and I've probably met 15,000 of them. So it's it's never give up. Never give up, no. And you've shared so much about what parents and families can do and what teachers can do, and the support that's available, and that if we as parents we think about standing beside them and connecting and really starting there with our own regulation, connecting with our kids, and then bringing into play so much else of what we've talked about today. And it's a long game. It's a journey, and it's difficult, but like you say, there's so much hope. Difficult, but I'm sure you're the same, Jodie. Just amazing, an amazing one too. It's just such an amazing privilege to be a part of guiding these little kids. Yes. Oh gosh, and you're doing such a brilliant job, and it's just an absolute joy to introduce listeners, if they don't already know about the podcast. So Pop Culture Parenting, it's Billy's a developmental paediatrician, Nick is a developing dad, and it's just the friendship is beautiful, the vulnerability, the openness, obviously the science and the strategies and the stories are exceptional. Tell us a little bit about the podcast. Obviously it's wherever you find podcasts, you can find it. But. So it's great. It came out off a Churchill Fellowship, same as the book, to explore how we can use different media formats to share the science of child development and mental health. And it's beautiful. We kind of use 80s and 90s movies. We often get parents now saying, I didn't grow up then. Can you use more recent movies? Which is fair enough. But we use 80s and 90s movies, and I do that really intentionally because every bit of the podcast is evidence-based. Our cultural influences on us growing up had a big part of how we see masculinity or how to respond to emotions. So I use movies to weave the evidence through that topic that we pick, whether it's, Attachment and Heat was a recent movie that people seem to get a lot out of those episodes, or Co-Regulation in Jurassic Park, or Mental Health First Aid in Aliens, or Responding to Emotions in Terminator, because we watched those movies and they influenced and provided, this guidance for us that wasn't really right, and it was insensitive or didn't understand or whatever. Some of it's beautiful. The best mental health first aid that has existed in anything I've ever seen is in Aliens. The way that Ripley supports this beautiful little traumatized kid is perfect mental health first aid. So I get the opportunity to cut that out and then talk about it. And Nick and I are just exploring this in our own journey and what I've learned from clinic and all my training. And then our part 2 is all these phenomenal people send in their questions, their experience, their advice and their reflection, including lots of professionals that work in this space. And we just talk about it. And it's an amazing, huge privilege to be a part of. And it was a test to see, does this format work to try and help people in the community? And it looks like it has. It's amazing. It gets listeners all over the world in communities that share it with each other and use it as a point. A lot of mums have brought dads into the space because they're it's about anxiety, but it's also about the movie Jaws. And so they can watch it and, try and hook them in. And then that reflection is often the most powerful bit. And the best bit about the reflection is the vulnerability of other people sharing their experience in supporting kids and their own mental health issues. So, so that's the podcast, which is amazing. Yeah, pop culture parenting is what we came up with. Yeah,
it's very, very clever and such a brilliant format. So, like I said, it's so entertaining. There's so much to learn, and also when you listen to the parent questions, it's really comforting because it's helpful to know you're not alone in your challenges. And so parents can listen, and even though their question might not be answered, they might not have had a question that week, but they can listen to what other families are going through and take so much from that. So the book I have in my hand, it's called 10 Things I Wish You Knew About Your Child's Mental Health. And I have a little surprise for you because you might not have seen it, but there's your first, because it's only just been published, your first review on Amazon. Have you read it yet?
Oh, no. Wow.
All right, I'm going to read this.
Okay.
It's quite long. I'm just showing Billy.
Hopefully it's a good one.
Actually, Billy and I are very lucky. We share a publisher, Sophie Ambrose. I was texting her, Billy, and she said to say hello. And she said, amazing. Make sure Billy reads the Amazon review. And I thought, I'm going to go one better than that. I'm going to read it to him.
Well, Sophie actually came up with the title of the book. So,
did she?
Yeah, that's how amazing Sophie is.
She's amazing. So, hello, Sophie. We love you. All right. So, here we go. This is a review from Amazon. 5-star, of course. This is by Lauren Koziel. So, if you're listening, Lauren, thank you so much. It's not widely regarded as fact, but mental health begins long before birth, conception, or delivery. It is an imprint on the person as a whole as a result of family and systems they're surrounded by. Experiences that shape ancestors are passed on as intergenerational traumas, and before long, children and families find themselves grappling in the thick of it, questioning what they've done wrong or why they deserve such challenges. Enter this book and the brilliant mind and generous, lion-hearted spirit of Dr. Billy. I know I sound like he has paid me to say it, but I've never met the man other than religiously listening to his catalogue of free and amazing podcast episodes. Yet the level of connection he shares is so palpable and authentic. He warns you'll need tissues, and he is so on the money with that. This is all in capitals. Every human must read this book for the betterment of our children, our children's children, and ourselves, to just be able to integrate and delight in the journey of this crazy, wild ride called life. If you're a parent, read it. If you're an aunt, uncle, neighbour, read it. If you're an educator, a barista selling baby chinos, just read it. Heartfelt thanks to you, Dr. Billy Garvey, and hugest congratulations on achieving the reach you've been striving for and sharing this soul-filled work you are doing one day at a time. I may only be able to leave a review, but it is my pebble to the pond to keep this ripple going. Isn't that brilliant?
Wow. I must needed tissues just to hear that then. But yeah, amazing. And I feel like baristas and hairdressers, one of my best mental health supports is my hairdresser. Those people are just so important in our community. We need to value them more. But that's amazing. Thank you, Jodie. That's nice to hear that there's some positive feedback about the book already.
Absolutely. And I've been reading, I always highlight my books, but absolutely brilliant. Great read. It's a Penguin book, so I highly recommend you go out and grab yourself a copy. And it's funny because Lucy, who normally sits where you are, Lucy Holmes, she posted a reel the other day that said, my hairdresser knows everything about me but always forgets which side I part my hair on. which is fair enough. And last of all, guiding growing minds, just before we finish off. So perhaps in answering and sharing a little bit about guiding growing minds, could you please also let listeners know how they can connect with you and all of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Jodie. Yeah, lots of different ways. So Guiding Growing Minds is a social enterprise that the podcast and the book now sit within, and it really is about how do we all lift our kids up? How do we make sure that every kid has the opportunity to thrive and live successful, rich and meaningful lives? So we do a number of different things. We come into community and talk. We do professional development with, which is based on my PhD around building the capacity of anyone that works with kids to understand it. We do reflective practice sessions in that, not just one-off and then not out of the can. It's like really tailored to the needs. And then we partner with a lot of organisations about how do we do this together, and really lucky to have partnered with some really amazing organisations. So yeah, please check it out. The podcast back catalogue is there, which people often ask for because I stupidly put the movie first. And so people are like, I want to find the one about this and have to go through.
Right,
so
yes.
The podcast back catalogue, we're on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. We're really just trying to share through all the avenues and where people live their lives, all of this stuff. And Guiding Growing Minds is really how we're doing that. It's got the support of some amazing organisations like AV1, Just Add Colour, Ivy Street, Raising Children's Network. Like, these are all people that organisations that invest time and expertise to supporting what we're doing, and it's a real privilege to have them as part of it. And they don't do it, we don't pay them, they don't pay us. It's really just about the relationship and how we can all bring our expertise to combine powers to do this better.
Yes, yeah, and you do it so well, and it's been an absolute privilege to have you here in this studio and to have this time to talk with you. So thank you very, very much for your time.
Thanks, Jodie. I really appreciate your support. It's been lovely to chat with you.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. I hope you love this just as much as I have enjoyed the conversation. I feel a little bit sore in the cheeks because I've just been smiling at Billy for the last hour. So thank you for listening. Please share this with someone who you think will benefit, and recommend Pop Culture Parenting. And the book is available, and Guiding Growing Minds. You can find all of that online. You can search up any one of those names and find what you're looking for. Dr. Billy Garvey has been my guest. I'm Dr. Jodie Richardson, and it's always such a privilege to have your time, and I will be back with you again next week. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jodie Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodiericardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.